My name is Barbara O'Toole and I am the DICE lecturer here in Marino Institute of Education in Dublin. I'm going to firstly talk about this primary school teaching pack called Just Connections, Just Trade, a teaching resource about Africa. It's aimed at 5th and 6th classes and it's available as a download from the MIE website. It was produced in association with the NGO Proudly Made in Africa, and it was supported with funding from Irish Aid and Marino Institute of Education. The pack contains a series of lesson plans that aim to counter and challenge children's perceptions of Africa. Most educational discourse in the West about Africa is framed in terms of deficit. It typically begins with stories of conquest and enslavement and then moves on to a focus on poverty and hunger and need. And this goes hand in hand with messages about the benevolent interventions of the West, the kind of white saviour mentality. So the pack aims to counter these perspectives. It's based in active learning methodologies such as investigation and inquiry, group work and discussion, debate, trade simulations, and all of this is designed to counter and challenge the single story of Africa. The pack introduces children in age-appropriate ways to processes of trade. So concepts such as supply chains and value chains are introduced, and the idea of value added is explained. What does this mean? Well, raw materials are typically exported from African countries and manufactured into finished products in the West and then sold on at a profit. Now, raw materials tend to be cheap. So when a commodity is manufactured fully in the West, that means that most of the profit remains in the West and is taken out of the African countries. So for example, packets of tea bags are more valuable than tea leaves. But when the manufacturing process takes place within African countries, then more of the profit remains in the countries and local communities benefit. So for example, when the women of the Lulu Life Co-op in South Sudan convert their shea beans into shea butter and soap and beauty products, then it doubles the profit that the women make, and that money remains in the local community. And this is just one example of the case studies that children explore in this pack, and they can see then how local communities can benefit when structural inequalities are addressed, even in a small scale way. So in age-appropriate ways, the children are able to study processes of trade, and they're able to see how a process of wealth extraction works. That summarises the teaching pack, Just Connections, Just Trade. I also want to mention this book, which examines these areas in more depth. It's called Challenging Perceptions of Africa in Schools, Critical Approaches to Global Justice Education. It's aimed at anybody with an interest in global justice education, for example, teacher educators, student teachers, masters, researchers, and so on. And it contains 10 chapters on topics, for example, trade justice in schools and colleges. It looks at racial stratification. There's a chapter which examines primary school textbooks for their depictions of Africa. And there's also a chapter on sending programs, which looks at where students from the global north go on short-term visits to African countries. The overall purpose of the book is to challenge assumptions and stereotypes and to urge educators to carry this type of questioning approach into classrooms at all levels of the system so that education about Africa is framed in terms of justice. The book is a call to action for educators. It reflects our hope for the transformative potential of education as well as our vision for a just and equitable global society.